I've had a great chance to work with some great media companies, for some great ones over the years. I would probably say my favorite company that I worked for was probably the Walt Disney Company. For a couple of reasons. The main reason I loved it was we got to go to the front of the line at Walt Disney World. Has anybody been to Walt Disney World in the US? I mean, the lines are like 3 hours long. And my kids grew up thinking you could just walk to the front of the line. And so they got a reality check. My wife owns the 3rd largest equestrian event of its kind in the US. And so I sell all the sponsorships and media for that. Sell all the sponsorships and media for Sales Training World, for the Coach X event. So I'm responsible personally for about $2.5 to almost $3 million in ad sales each year myself. So I spend about 50% of the time feeding my family selling media, and the other 50% of the time training groups just like you. And so I think I would say I enjoyed the training better, because how many people in the last 30 days have literally wanted to really just punch an advertiser in the nose? Really? So only 2 hands went up. Okay. All right. Somebody, what did you say? Strangle them? Strangle them? Yeah. So the reason I think that I share this with you is because I think it's important for me to be able to share with you what I'm actively doing. So any of the ideas we're going to talk about now, or we're going to talk about in our next hour when we talk about 20 revenue ideas, are all things that I see in action. Now, some of you don't know I moved to the state of Oklahoma. We've been there 2 years, and we're actually going to be leaving in 2 weeks. We moved, we stayed. Here's the main reason why, these little things. So I've been there 2 years and seen 7 tornadoes, 7 within 5 miles of our house. Every morning when you wake up, the wind blows. Every single morning, the wind is blowing. Wonderful people, wonderful schools, wonderful media products. Probably the biggest thing that we're most famous for, besides tornadoes, is high school football. High school football, if you've ever seen the movie Friday Night Lights, have you ever seen that movie? That is our little town in Oklahoma. This is my son Dylan, number 32, running the football. This is a freshman child. So this kid right here, okay, is 16 years old, is 6'2", weighs almost 300 pounds. And as his mother would say, he's chasing my baby, is what he's doing. My son said this was his best friend. I said, oh no, that's not your best friend, because he let this big boy go. He let him go. So we're really proud of him. All right, so when we're done, I've got a bunch of new stuff that I'd love to give to you. I've got an ebook that I'll give to you. I've got a copy of this presentation I'll give to you, and 50 revenue ideas as well. So to get that, because of the laws in Canada, I'm not just going to send you a bunch of stuff because I don't want to end up in jail, all right? So at the back of the room over here by the door are my cards. Drop me a card there, and I'll send you all of these things, because that way you won't have to feverishly take notes the entire time. Sounds good? Sound good? All right, let's rock forward. All right, so when we're done, if you're trying to find more information about the things we're talking about today, this would be the website that you would go to, 360adsales.com. That's where the Ad Sales Podcast is at, and that's also where monthly webinars are at, free of charge to you at 360adsales.com, okay? All right, so let's rock forward. I'm going to give you 10 concepts today I'd love for you to consider as we're talking about increasing the media ad buy. Now, for some of you in the room, it might be, hey, I want to sell more print. That's cool. For some of you, it might be, I want to sell more digital. For some of you, it might be, I want to sell anything I can, okay? How many people just want to sell anything they can? Anybody? All right, there we go. I see your sister in the back. That's right. Sell anything I can. All right, so to that end, one of the things that's very, very important for us to understand is we're going to have to change our sales game a little bit. How many people have been selling for more than 20 years? Anybody in the room? Oh, wow, a lot of people in the room. How many people have been married for more than 20 years? Wow, a lot of people in the room. Anybody not married that wants to be one day? Not one hand went up. Not one. How many people are happily married? Okay, statistically, half of you are lying. Just so you know. All right. Concept number one. That's the truth. It's true. I speak the truth. Concept number one. We really have to understand that we need to kill the question, what is your budget? We're talking about killing the question, what is your budget? I just saw about 10 of you go, huh? What? Because since the very beginning of ad sales time, we've been trained to walk in and talk to clients and try to figure out through open-ended questions, which usually are old, maybe a little bit vague. We've been trained to try to identify through all kinds of little sneaky ways what is an advertiser's budget. How many times, since most of you have been selling more than 10 years, how many times has an advertiser literally, by percent, actually told you what their budget is? 10% of the time? 5? 4? How many times you walk in and the advertiser says, I really don't know? When you say, well, tell me, what's your budget? I really don't know. Or our budget isn't quite set yet. Or how about this one? Our budget's already committed for the whole year. I don't really care what you have to sell me. I don't have any money. Which is interesting to me when you're talking to a marketing director and they say to you, I don't have any money. And I say, no money for the year or no money for me? Yeah, they give me no money at all. One time I'm going to say, so what do you do all day? Seriously, what do you do all day as a marketing director with no money? What do you do? Social media. That's what they do all day. Great. All right, so let's talk through this. Let's talk through this. Killing the question about budget and actually approaching it a slightly different way. When you go back to your organizations or you talk to your colleagues, one of the things that you're going to walk away from this is that there's 3 very important questions that I'm really drilling into now. So what I want to ask is I want to ask this of an advertiser. Mr. Advertiser or Mrs. Advertiser, when you think about competing in this community, if you're city and regional, or in this industry, if you're B2B, do you want to be present in this market? Do you want to be competitive in this market? Or do you want to be dominant in this market? Those are basically the 3 options. I guess there's a 4th one, non-existent, okay? Present, competitive, or dominant. What position, Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser, do you want to take in this market? Because quite honestly, it doesn't matter if they have $5,000 or they have $50,000. There's a certain amount of money that you know it takes to be either present, competitive, or dominant in the marketplace. Is that an accurate statement? Okay? There's a certain amount of money. If you've been selling for any length of time, you know what it takes for a company to be present, competitive, or dominant. I'm going to give you 2 examples every time we go to one of these scenarios. A consumer example and a B2B example. All right, let's talk consumer for just a brief second. Let's say Toronto as an example. There is a jeweler in this town. I know there is. There's a jeweler that everywhere, when you turn on TV, you see their ads. When you drive down the street, you see their billboards. When you watch cable television, you see their insertions. When you pick up the newspaper, you see their ads, okay? Now, for anybody that lives here, what's the name of that jeweler? It's not a trick question, I'm just asking. Does anybody live in Toronto? Okay, so that would be a hard example for us to talk about. Let's just say as an example, or you're very tired. I saw some of you at the bar really late last night. All right, let's just say, for example, it is called Walker's Jewelry, just as an example. In every market or community you serve, you have examples of auto dealers, jewelers, retailers that are present, competitive, and you definitely know those that are dominant. Let's talk about the medical business on the B2B side for a second. When you're a publisher of a medical publication, it's very obvious to those of us that would publish those publications whose strategy is present, whose strategy is competitive, and whose strategy is dominant. So for me, Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser, it's not about how much you think you need to spend. It's actually about how much you do need to spend based upon what other people, your competitors, are doing in the marketplace or your overall strategy. Well, we're moving everything to social media. I want to look them in the eye and say, I get it. It doesn't matter, though, because quite honestly, do you want to be present, competitive, or dominant? Because if all you're doing is social media and you think you're going to be dominant in the marketplace, I've got a bridge to sell you someplace. It's not going to happen because social media is great. Would we agree that we like social media? I like social media. It's killed some of my print business, but I like it. But social media is not the answer to being dominant in the marketplace. It's just not. Is it a good piece, a good marketing play for some folks? I think it's a piece of the puzzle, but you're not going to be dominant if all you're doing is social media. All right, so what will an advertiser say? An advertiser will almost always say when you ask this question, I want to be dominant. Of course they want to be dominant. Everybody wants to be dominant. So then what we have to do is walk them through a scenario of what it takes to be dominant in the marketplace that we serve, whether it's a community type organization, or magazine or newspaper or website, or it's B2B. So let me explain to you how you might do that, okay? All right, so this would be just an example. This is just an example of if I am working with an advertiser and they say to me, I don't know whether I want to be present, competitive, or dominant. So this would be the total ad spend in the market or the total ad spend in the industry, and this is just a scenario, okay? So let's look at this together. To be present, Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser, in the total market, meaning my magazine, my website, my media, in addition, maybe TV, maybe other magazines as well. Would you agree that if an advertiser wants to be dominant, they're probably going to have to buy more media than just what you have to offer? Yes? Maybe? Okay, in most cases, the answer is probably yes. Now, some of you in this room actually represent the only magazine or one of only 2 in the brand, in the industry sector. But still, if they're going to be dominant, they're going to need to do your magazine, another, maybe some event promotion, social media, some other things online, okay? So I would say in this scenario, I would say to be present in the total market or sector, you would have to spend, say, less than $50,000 to be present. To be competitive would be $50,000 to $75,000 a year, annual. And then to be dominant would be $75,000 or more. Then what I have to do is break out, what are you going to need to spend with me? So those in the marketplace or the sector or the community that are dominant are spending with us $55,000 or more. And then you would give examples. Those that are competitive in the market sector that we serve, you're going to spend with us $15,000 to $45,000 or whatever the scenario is for your folks. To be present in the marketplace is going to be less than $10,000 with us. What you're going to find when you run these scenarios, and I'm going to give you an example of how you can figure this out. When you run these scenarios, you're going to find out most advertisers do not budget enough money each year annually to be present in the sector or community that they serve. Would you agree or disagree? Most. Now, you've got savvy marketers out there, right? You work with them. We actually refer to them as a pain in the butt, right? Those are the savvy ones, okay? Would you agree or disagree that a small advertiser is as big a pain as a big advertiser? Yes. Maybe more. Would you agree? Okay. So because of that, we recognize that no matter which area of coverage they choose, they're probably going to be a pain in the tail. Probably. Now, we don't have time to talk about it today. If I came and trained your company, what we would do is we would figure out these folks here are called minnows. These folks over here are typically called whales. These folks right in the middle, I call them cod. They're sort of that perfect fish in the middle that you can use and eat for almost any reason for any season, okay? So when you're prospecting, you want to be prospecting away from this pool of fish and want to spend more time on this pool and this pool. Does that make sense fundamentally? All right? All right, so the question really is, if you look at the description of this class today, what are the three things that you're going to ask to potentially increase the total ad spend? I would suggest to you that now when I'm hosting sales calls, and I'm doing this different than I've ever done it before, I'm not focusing in on trying to figure out what they think their budget is. I'm presenting them ideas of what it's going to take for them to be present, competitive, or dominant in either the community or the marketplace that they serve. Now, they might still lie because that's what they do. They're professionals at it. They're worse than salespeople when it comes to that. But for me, this is the critical piece. And as we walk through these last 9 steps, they're all going to feed into this area of questioning. So what you have to understand also as we walk forward in this conversation is that we have to change our consultative sales approach. We have to change it. Because 80-some% of buyers that responded to a survey that SAP did, 80% said they would rather go to the dentist than have you walk them through a needs assessment. Okay? Now, needs assessments are so commonplace that there's companies across Canada, the United States, Australia, and Europe, that's all they teach, is how you walk an advertiser or a client through a needs assessment. In today's landscape, and in the age of today's buyers, okay, so we're talking about younger buyers that are less patient. We're also, everybody tries to blame the millennials on being impatient. Really? Have you met somebody over the age of 65 lately? Seriously, don't raise your hand. I can see you in the room, okay? You're not as patient as you think that you are. In the United States, Nielsen calls 65-plus people the silent generation. Really? I know my mother-in-law's over the age of 65. Not silent at all. Okay? No silence there. So we've got to change our approach. The reason we have to change our approach is if 80% of people don't want to walk through a needs assessment and everything that we do on the sales call is based around asking probing questions to try to get to what their budget is or to find out their needs, then for me, that means that we're always potentially going to lose because we're using an old school technique to try to sell digital products, try to convince people to buy traditional products, etc. So in my opinion, a better way to handle it is Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser. After we talk about how great their company is, talk about what they're doing on Facebook, let me ask you this question. Rather than spend a bunch of time walking you through a needs assessment, let me just ask you this simple question. In the market that you serve, as you think about your competitors, Would you like to be present, competitive, or dominant? They will almost always say either what do you mean, or they will say dominant. Then what I'm able to do is I'm able to share success stories, which we'll talk about in a minute, about advertisers that have worked with us for years that truly understand what it means to be dominant in this market, to be competitive and to be present. The whole goal behind it, if you want to increase the ad spend, is to get them to understand that they have not even budgeted enough money to be present. Now, will you have to walk away sometimes? Yes, you will have to walk away sometimes. But let me just share this with you as well. There are often times that I've taken an ad from a client and I knew it was not going to work. I just knew it. But that's how I feed my family. That's how I make my house payment. And in the end, I've almost always regretted it because people, advertisers that are unhappy, tell how many people? One? Oh, I wish that was true. Usually when people are unhappy, they tell at least 10 to 12 people. Would you agree or disagree? When people are happy with a product or a service, how many people do they tell? A couple of people. All right? Okay, so before we move off of this, let me pause for a second and ask you if this, at base value, from our starting point, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, now you may not agree. If you've got a question, this is a small group. If you've got a question, raise your hand, because I'd rather walk through the questions now than you get to the very, very end and we're rushed. Does that make sense to everybody so far? All right? How many people like this so far? So far? Okay, all three of you. Good. Stick with me. Stick with me. You've got to change your approach if you're going to increase the ad spend. All right, so that's the first point. Let's move on to the second point. And some of you are writing feverishly. Don't forget, I'll give you a copy of this. All right, concept number 2. You've got to come to the conversation with a competitive angle. So how do you know how much an advertiser would need to spend in the marketplace? The way you do that is by creating market share and competitive analysis reports. Now, this company, Media Radar, they don't pay me a penny. Although we should talk about that. All right, they don't pay me a penny. They don't pay me a penny to say this. Why am I bringing this up? It's not because they're a sponsor. I talk about this at other conferences. There are very few companies, there's maybe 3, maybe two in the entire world that are able to help you put together market share reports and competitive analysis summaries. What this company, and a couple others, just to be fair, do is they help you put together market share reports to determine what is someone actually doing, an advertiser, doing in the marketplace over a given period of time. Also, based on that, what is the market share that your advertiser you're talking to, as well as their competitors, how much market share do they actually occupy? And then in most cases, what does it cost for them to have that market share? Now, you might say, okay, we're a small company, we can't afford to use a third-party vendor. So then what do? You just pay attention. You subscribe to your competitors, you pay attention to the TV channels that are your competition, radio, etc., and you keep track of those things. And then you figure out what does it cost. Or, even easier is, an advertiser of yours that's dominant in your sector is usually doing a lot of things. You can usually talk to them and say, in an effort to help you and others like you, what does it cost to run that TV ad? What does it cost to be a part of that event? You'll be surprised the number of people that will tell you exactly what it costs. Now, not all of them, but you'll be surprised the number of people that will. So in order for you to be able to present this scenario, what you have to do is you have to be able to present to them or come up with a competitive summary or market share report. All right, now let me pause. Does that make sense to everybody? All right? Now, the reason that I'm pausing and really want you to comprehend this is because, A, I know that it works because I do this every day. Not train, but sell as well. And the other piece is I really want you to walk away from this class today with the ability to radically transform your sales life. See, some people just want to be motivated, and that's fine. You know, we'll be funny, we'll make fun of advertisers, and you can walk away being motivated, or you can say, listen, I want to radically transform my sales life, I want to do things completely different, and I want to make a lot more money. This approach is where I found a lift in my personal sales of about 45% just by changing this approach. And I'm selling more print now than I ever have sold before, because those that are going to be dominant in the marketplace are going to buy digital, social, print. They're going to do a lot more than those that only have the budget to be present. Now, you might be saying, well, Ryan, I work with advertisers all the time, and they got $5. Okay? Maybe they're the wrong people to be working with, or I actually have people, when I present this, I've never really thought about it that way. Are you aware or not aware that most successful companies will spend 4 to 6%, sometimes as high as 10%, of their gross sales on marketing the next year? 4 to 6%, as high as 10. I have discovered through this scenario that the vast majority of the advertisers I'm working with are dedicating less than 0.5% of their annual gross sales to marketing. Less than 0.5%. And they wonder why they're not competitive and why they're not seeing return on investment from the print advertising. Because you're not running enough ads, stupid. That's the reason. God, don't you want to say it some days? Really? Don't you want to just grab them by the throat? Seriously. Come on, okay? All right, so what I'm looking for when I'm creating a competitive angle, so let's just say as an example, I noticed that Acme is running with one of my competitors, maybe on web, maybe in print, whatever the circumstance is. What most salespeople naturally do is they immediately call in Acme. So you see Acme running in a competitor, and you immediately pick up the phone. That's what every media salesperson does. People say to me all the time, Ryan, one of the reasons I don't like running on your Sales Training World website is the moment I put an ad up, I get like 90 calls from everybody that wants to sell me something. And I said, well, that just tells you a lot of people are paying attention, right? No, it's annoying. Remember, in the media business, B2B or consumer, when you see a competitor, an advertiser running in a competitor, these folks have already been asked out on a date, and they've already said yes. They've already been asked to prom. They've already asked to be married, and they've said yes. So when you're calling on them, typically the answer is going to be, no. Typically the answer is going to be no, people. So what I try to do is figure out, so who does not love Acme? Who does not like this advertiser? And then what I do is I call on all of those people. That's my strategy. So when I see an advertiser in another publication, I don't call on them immediately. I will eventually. But instead what I do is I figure out who are 2 or 3 of their competitors. Then I call their competitors, and I say, hey, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but your biggest competitor, Acme, is really being aggressive right now with their marketing plans. Their absence in our publication is an opportunity for you. We have a similar audience. Maybe we're more affordable. Maybe we have a bigger reach, or whatever the circumstance is. Now, some of you, I can see it in your eyes. You're like, ooh, I'll do this to my current advertisers in my current publication. Typically, you don't want to play the strategy on people that are already running with you, because sometimes advertisers will talk. But for the publishers, I know there's a couple publishers in the room and owners in the room, it's also important to understand that very often you will say to one of your sales reps, I see that Acme's running in this other magazine, our competitor, why don't we have them? Okay? Oh, well, we've heard that before. All right? Now, it's not that you shouldn't call on them, but I think there's a better strategy, and that is coming to their competition and trying to sell their competitors first before I go to them. See, very rarely do I think this happens. An advertiser wakes up in the morning and goes, oh, God, I hope Ryan Dohrn calls me today. I want to buy a print ad. I think that that's unlikely. Do you agree? Unlikely, okay? And I'm a pretty nice guy, all right? Instead, what I think most often happens is, man, I got a lot of things to get done today. I have a lot of crap going on. And when that phone rings and I see such and such media company pop up, I don't really want to talk to anybody today. So my voicemails and emails are based around their competitors, which usually makes the hair on the back of their neck stand up. Then, when I can get a meeting with them, so I'll say something like, I've got some competitive intelligence about Acme that I'd love to share with you. It's nothing unethical or anything like that, but that'd be fun though, wouldn't it? It's nothing like that. But I would like to talk with you about what they're doing to really be dominant in the marketplace right now, and what you can do to either be competitive or be dominant. And then you come to them with that market share report, which you can do easily, and then you walk them through, do you want to be present, competitive, or dominant? What's the scenario? All right, concept number 3, if you want to increase the overall ad buy, and that is understanding that if you're going to be successful, you need to sell with success stories. You have to sell based upon other advertisers that have been with you that have been successful. Now, I see some of you nodding your head because this isn't a new concept to everyone that's in this room. What I find, though, is that most people don't take it to the level that I take it. So when I'm on a sales call with somebody and I want them to buy print from me and I want them to buy digital, the fastest way for me to get more money from people. Now, I know that sounds mean, but what I want to do is I want to get more money from advertisers. Who's with me in the room? Okay? If you didn't raise your hand, are you in accounting or what? Who are you? Okay? So it's a success story because by nature, people are adverse to risk. By nature, most people don't like to take chances. How many people have jumped out of a plane, skydived? Oh, you went skydiving? Was it fun? Yeah. Was it fun? Okay. In Vegas? I'd always worry about doing it in Vegas. Okay, all right. All right, how many people want to try it, though? Want to go skydiving one day? All right, a couple people? We should do it. We should try it. I think it'd be fun. Most people are adverse to risk. How many people have been bungee jumping? No? Oh, wow. 1, 2. Was it super scary, the bungee jumping thing? Yeah? All right, so but you did it, right? Did they push you or did you actually jump?
I nearly died, but I did.
Yeah, okay. All right, there you go. Most people by nature are adverse to risk. Would you agree or disagree? Okay. Most people are adverse to change. Would you agree or disagree? All right, so what you're doing by asking them to jump this chasm and buy more from you, you're asking them to take a risk, you're asking them to make a change. You're asking human beings to do two things that they hate, okay? The only thing they probably hate more is taxes, probably, or something like that, okay? So because we know people by nature are adverse to risk, because we know that they don't like change, the next thing we have to understand is we can sway them with success stories. So for me, at the very beginning of my sales call, before I do anything else, I'm sharing success stories. Now, let's talk about that for a brief second. It's very, very important for us to understand what's a good success story. A good success story is not me talking to Howard as an advertiser, okay, about another advertiser. Say that Howard sells couches, sofas, that are $2,500 a piece. Now, what most advertisers want to do, and I'll only pick on Howard because he's in the front row. What most advertisers want to do is they want to run one ad, and they want to sell 50 couches. So they want to pay us $1,000 for an ad, and then they want to make $100,000 off that ad. Wouldn't that be nice? Just boom, dope, okay, right? That's what most of them want to do. Now, a success story isn't about the number of sofas that another advertiser sold. A success story is, Howard, I'd love to share with you 3 brief examples of businesses like yours that have been very successful with us. They've been advertising for a very long time. This is so-and-so, he's been with us for 5 years. This is so-and-so, she's been with us for 3 years. This is so-and-so, they went from a quarter page to a half page to a full, now they do a full digital campaign. The moment that I say to Howard that so-and-so sold 15 sofas, he's going to want to sell 15, so I don't do that. Instead, what he's going to do is say, well, Ryan, that's all fine and dandy. When they run an ad, how much stuff do they actually sell? It's a very common question. My response is very simple. Howard, I can only assume that after you're very successful with us, you don't want me walking out in the street and telling everybody about your business, right? And he says, yes. So what I can tell you is they have renewed for 5 years consecutively. I can only assume they're not going to quit. And these folks have been running with us for a very, very long time. Based on what I observe of your business, based on the question of do you want to be present, competitive, or dominant, okay, I think this would be a very good fit for you. So for me, the fastest way to get high-end is to get more money from people is to surround everything that I do with success stories, okay? All right, now, let's back up to the beginning of this presentation. Why did I tell you what I do, where I work, and that I actually sell media every day? Why was it important for me to explain to you that I actually sell what you sell every day? Why was that an important point? Credibility. And why did I share with you that I'm responsible for $2 to $2.5 million worth of advertising myself? Success stories, validation, whoever said that, validated that. It's important for me, for you to understand that I'm not feeding you a bunch of crap and that I actually do what you do. I can't stand hearing from people that talk about sales training that haven't sold anything in 25 years. I mean, it makes me really, really cranky and crazy. How about you? Yeah? Okay. So success stories is the next piece. Now, for those of you that are in the room that have sat through one of my sessions before, and most of this stuff here is new, have you tried the success story piece, and how do the success stories work for you? I saw a few of you raise your hand or that said, how do success stories work? When they work well for you when you share that with others? Yes, 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 okay. Now, if you don't, and if the way you sell is based around open-ended, vague questions to try to get to that budget question, which we covered, I'm telling you, you will get further by priming the conversation with success stories and then leading into the conversation of Mr. or Mrs. Advertiser, do you want to be present, competitive, or dominant? You're just going to get further along the way. The other thing is this. Every media sales rep does it basically the same way. They ask open-ended, vague questions to try to get to the person's budget, to determine their needs, to leave the office, to create a proposal, to come back and chase them down. All right? I'm not a chaser. I mean, I chased my wife. That was the last time I did any chasing, okay? I'm not a chaser. I don't have time. I don't have time for it. All right, so think about this as a takeaway. What are your 3 best advertising success stories? Now, you can share them. Let's just say that Howard and I were on the exact same sales team. He could use my success stories. I can use his. But without success stories as a part of that sales meeting with an advertiser, you're missing out on one of the most powerful things that you can share, and that is success. All right, so let's talk about the bungee jumping. Usually before someone bungee jumps, they see someone else do it before them, just to make sure they didn't get too stretched out. Usually most people when skydiving don't want to be the first person out of the plane. Usually, in most cases. Now, I'm weird. I'll just do it. I'll just jump. I don't care. But you were first. Okay, so we're together in the weird camp. Join me in the front weird row, all right? Good choice sitting in row 3, sir, all right? This is not only the spit zone, it's the weird zone up here with Howard and I, okay? So that's why success stories work. Typically, before someone takes a chance with you, typically if you share a success story, you will lessen their reluctance to be a part of what it is that you're doing. Make sense? Okay? All right, so for me, let's move on to concept number 4. If you're going to sell more, increasing the ad spend, that's the title of the session. We want to do a reality check. We have to be able to explain to the advertiser what's actually going to happen when they run an ad with us. Now, we're at MagNet, Magazines Canada. Does everybody in the room have at least some a print component to what they're doing? Is anybody not? Raise your hand if you don't have any print. Okay, a couple, you're all digital? Okay, all right, digital. It'll still work, my friend. It'll still work, all right? So for me, because whether they're running a digital ad or they're running a print ad, most advertisers are completely unaware of what's actually going to happen when that ad actually hits the press or hits the street. Would you agree or disagree? All right, now most folks, what they want to have happen, here is the consumer buying cycle. This is what happens when someone considers a new product. Typically, an advertiser is going to run some type of awareness ad. Make sense? All right? Now, what they want to do is they want to skip all of this, and they want to jump right to the end. They want a purchase to happen. They want this to happen immediately. They want to run an ad, and they immediately want someone to buy 65 things from them, or 150 things. They want to run a $5,000 ad and get $100,000 in return. They want literally 1,500% return on their investment. Does that make sense? That's how most advertisers' brains function. Here's really what happens. If you look, an awareness ad is going to run. If I don't have a need for that product or that service, if my brain says no, then I just get caught in that loop, in this loop right here, until I have a need. Does that make sense? Okay, the moment I have a need, my brain triggers go. When my brain triggers go, that's when I begin to recognize, and my brain remembers all the ads that I have potentially seen over the course of time. Does that make sense? Now, even at that moment in time, I still don't immediately go and buy the product. Most people don't. Now, whether you're in the US or you're in Europe or you're in Canada, it doesn't matter. There's products called direct response products. We all know what they are. Ginsu knives, the Thigh Master, okay? Things you see on TV, things that you bought, anybody bought that? Okay. Oh, you like the action, but I did. That's what it was, okay. The Thigh Master, Ginsu knives, things that are typically around $75 or less, typically. Those type of items are called direct response products. Direct response products don't require social influence, they don't require personal consideration, and they don't require doubt and validation, because the price point on those products is low enough that you really don't have to think about it much. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, let's talk about the vast majority of people that advertise in your magazines or on your websites, whether it's B2B or consumer. Typically, they're going to be selling a product. Typically, if they're going to afford to advertise with you, they're typically going to be selling products or services over that $75 threshold, whether it's 75 Canadian or 75 US, doesn't matter. Over that threshold, a smaller amount. So let's go back to Howard's $2,500 couches. Let's just say it's only a $1,500 sofa. Still, it's highly unlikely that someone's going to see an ad for that sofa and immediately make a decision. Yet most advertisers structure their advertising to be direct response oriented. I've actually seen people that sell large-scale, heavy equipment for construction, million-dollar products that you buy, million-dollar machines, and they structure everything that they do in their advertising to be direct response oriented. As if somebody sees the ad for a million-dollar piece of machinery and immediately calls and makes a purchase. It typically doesn't happen like that. It just doesn't. The price point is too high. All right, it wasn't that long ago I needed to buy a big screen TV. Well, I didn't need to buy one. I wanted to buy one. All right? So what I began to do is I realized I had seen ads for like the Samsung Curve TV. We were actually talking about it with some folks last night. I saw the ad for the Samsung Curve TV. And I thought, wow, that looks cool. But at the time, I didn't have a need. Or actually, more specifically, my wife hadn't given me permission to go buy one yet. Okay? Usually that's funnier. Okay, fine. All right. Eventually, she said yes. My brain said yes. And then what I began to do is I began step number 1. I had seen the ads. I had actually been to maybe a restaurant or bar and seen the TV in action. But I began to be socially influenced. Who has one? Have I seen one? Do I like the way that it works, whatever the circumstance is? Then I began to personally consider it. Will it fit on the wall of my family room? If I buy this, what is my wife going to want to buy for $2,000? Okay? You married people, I would just expect that you would laugh more at this, okay? After I personally consider it, then what I do is I begin to doubt. Do I really need it? Should I actually spend it? If you think about it, whether you're buying a car, whether you're buying a sofa for your family room, whether you're buying a brand new dishwasher. We recently went to buy a dishwasher, and I went through all of these different things in my head, all these different considerations. Have I seen anybody else that's had this or talked about it? I'm personally going to consider it. Then I'm going to doubt whether, do we really need it? Do we really need it, or can we get away with one that's a little bit cheaper? After all, it's just a dishwasher. Then, and only then, down here in the yellow, do I actually make the purchase. This type of scenario does not exist. People don't typically see an ad and immediately go out and make a purchase. They don't. All right, so where do we come in? Increasing the media buy. Where we come in is we can help them with social media campaigns. Excuse me. We can help them with print ad campaigns. Maybe you've got events. You've got newsletters. You've got digital editions, or whatever the circumstance is. As media companies, we can help them as their buyers are going through these points of consideration. As their customers are going through the decision cycle or the consumer buying cycle, we can help them all along the way. That's where we fit into the mix. So what's your takeaway? In my opinion, your takeaway is very, very clear, and that is you need to be able to explain this in vivid detail to your advertisers, because most of them think this is what's going to happen. They're going to run one ad, and their life is immediately going to change. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, now, how do you do it? Can all your advertisers handle this? I would say that not all of them can handle it. Not all of them. Some of them will find this to be very elementary, very parochial. Some of them actually might find it to be offensive that you are actually walking them through this scenario. What I have found is that greater than 60-some% of advertisers, when I walk them through this scenario, they say something like, you know, I never really thought about it that way. I just never really thought about it that way. If you're working with an advertiser, they can't even afford to be present in the marketplace, this is the type of person that they are. And these type of people are a tremendous pain to you. It's painful to work with those folks because their expectations are completely and utterly unrealistic as to how marketing and people's brains actually work. Now, I have some clients that have made this into a little video. I've got some clients that take that exact sheet, which I'll give you when we're done. I'll email it to you. They take this on their sales calls. It's an excellent conversation piece. Excellent. You will probably find, I would say greater than 90% of your advertisers have never had someone walk them through this ever. They just think the way advertising works, run one ad and something immediately happens. Now, there are always circumstances where that does occur, correct? There's a lot of circumstances. I have some clients that have said, I put this one red dress in an ad, and I had 90 people come in and I sold out immediately. There are items that do operate, that can work like that. But typically, for most of the people represented in this room, it doesn't work that way. So if you want to increase the ad spend, you have to help the advertiser intimately understand what they actually need to do in the marketplace and how their potential customers are going to react to their advertising. All right, questions on that before we move on? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, go ahead.
In the consumer side, so not B2B per se, do you feel when this comes up or with your clients that the social stuff is where they think it'll go from awareness to purchase?
Yeah, so the question was, in case you couldn't hear it or for the video, on the consumer side, well, and also on the B2B side, do people in the social media, when they run social media ads, do they feel like it's a lot more direct response oriented? They absolutely do. But when we're going to get to something in a brief second, when I show you the cost to convert somebody from a clicker to a buyer has grown almost 500% in cost, it actually is not terribly effective from a financial perspective. But they think that that's going to happen. What's interesting is 87 some odd percent of people, marketing profs, did a big survey on how do people respond to social media. 80 some percent, 87 some odd percent said they've never bought a product or service because they saw it on social media. Usually it's because it's recommended by a friend, they've seen advertising about it, or, or whatever. Good question. Okay? All right, number 5, really understanding the sales consideration funnel. Number 5 of 10, understanding the sales consideration funnel. Meaning, when you are sitting with an advertiser, what do they need to be, what are they thinking about in their little pea-brained head? What are they thinking about as you're sitting there talking? And here's what they're thinking about. These 5 things. Number 1, is the salesperson a waste of time? That's the first thing. Now, a lot of you laugh, and rightfully so. Would you agree or disagree that most salespeople are utterly a waste of time? Most salespeople. A lot of them are. A lot of salespeople are. So probably the reason that you're not getting more meetings with advertisers is because somebody before you sucked. Bad. Really bad. Or somebody before you said, I only need 15 minutes, and then when they came and met with the person, they were there for an hour. Or someone before you, a salesperson before you, made promises that even you and I both know will never come true. And so because of that, it's usually not you. It's usually someone that came before you that was the problem. So that's why they're thinking, is this salesperson a waste of my time? That's why in every prospecting email that I send, I promise not to waste people's time. That's why I do it. Because I know that most people think salespeople are a waste of time. All right, you're sitting in front of an advertiser. You're trying to increase the ad spend. Will the salesperson be there for me? So after the sale, will that salesperson actually be there to help me? I'm not even going to ask you to raise your hands because 100% of people in this room, or 99.9% of people in this room, if I said, will you be there for your customers after the sale? Absolutely. What's interesting to me, I buy about $100,000 worth of media for my wife's company a year. What are the 2 times a year that I hear from those print sales reps? First time is, okay, when they want to sell me something, and the second time is the renewal, okay? I don't get a popcorn ball from them. I don't get a thank you note. I don't even get a virtual hug. I get nothing from them. Oh, I do get a bill, and thank you for that. Okay, that's really great customer service, okay? So you have to ask yourself, what is the retention program that you have in place, not your company? If you wait for your company to build the retention plan, you might be waiting a long time, okay? What retention plan do you have in place to make sure that you keep people happy? All right, the third thing that advertisers are thinking about, what is it that I'm going to feature in my ad? Whether it's print or digital, doesn't matter. There are hundreds, if not thousands of decisions as it relates to the advertising that they're going to create. So maybe you create spec ads for them. In the magazine business, spec ads are not very popular because they're expensive to create. In the newspaper business, I do a lot of work with newspapers. In the newspaper business, spec ads are something we do very, very often because most advertisers are not visual people. Do you agree? Most of them they can never figure out what's that ad going to look like. So let me give you a little tip. If you don't want to do spec ads, I would encourage you to go old school with this one technique, and that is put together a binder. If you're local, put together a binder of really amazing ads from the past that you really, really love. Give that advertiser things to look at. If you sell on the phone, sometimes I'll use a GoToMeeting or I'll send them a PDF of amazing ads from the past that have worked really, really well. Because clearly, the greatest form of flattery is, that'd be imitation, people, imitation, okay? All right, so the next thing they're thinking, what if this doesn't work? What if this is not going to work? So in the back of their mind, you have to understand, everybody's afraid of losing their job. Everyone is, typically, all right? Now, the reason that most people are afraid of losing their job is because they always got to keep their boss happy. They got to keep other people around them happy. They got to keep selling, whatever the circumstance is. So a marketing director, it's not just about spending money. It's about, if this doesn't work, I could get in trouble. So they're asking, is this ad going to work? What proof do you have? If you want me to spend more money with you, what proof do you have this actually works? I think that's something important to talk about. All right, how about this last one? Do I like this idea? And do I have the money? See, one of the things that I often ask when I'm closing with advertisers is, so what do you think? Oh, you know, I don't have any money. My budget's all spent for the year. Well, do you find value in what I just showed you? Do you like the idea, and do you find value in what I just presented? And if the answer to that question is no, I don't find any value in it, my response then is, tell me why. I've got a lot of businesses like yours that are very happy with us. Tell me why you don't see value in this. I really would like to know. Now, this is going to be interesting for all of you. Some of you know me on more of a personal level. When I am on a sales call, I'm really quiet and I'm super humble. Now, I'm not charismatic like I am today, because two reasons. Some of you were out drinking late last night. Got to keep you awake, okay? The other piece is we got to have fun together in these trainings. You we got to have some fun in these classes. But I would very often, if Howard was my advertiser, you know, what do you think, Howard, are the ideas that I presented? And he might say, well, Ryan, I think that they're good ideas, but they're just, I mean, it's too expensive. Tell me, do you find value in this? Do you understand when I talk about being present or competitive or dominant? Do you understand what that means to you and to your business? And I try to be really empathetic. I try to be very non-salesy. How many of you agree with me on this? The less you sell, typically the more you sell. Would you agree? Okay, now, some of you are old enough to remember, like me, the movie Glengarry, Glen Ross, or Tommy Boy, or those sales movies that are all about the hard sell. In today's landscape, whether you're dealing with a millennial or you're dealing with a baby boomer, the more you sell, the more you tighten that screw on top of them, the more you put pressure on them, most people are like, no, it's not going to work out. Why did the hard sell in the 80s and 90s in media actually work? Why could you call someone and say, hey, deadline is like tomorrow, where's your ad? Deadline is tomorrow, I need that contract. Why did that hard sell approach work? Lack of media options. There were like 6 or 8 options, maybe 10. Now, when you put the screws to somebody and you put the pressure on them and you use these closing techniques, all these books that have been written about it, they don't need you. Well, if you're going to put pressure on me and you're going to make me feel like crap for not making a decision, I'll go to your competitor or I'll just go to Facebook. I don't actually have to run an ad with you. That's why your strategies have to be uniquely different. You've got to come across as empathetic. You've got to come across as being a resource to people. If you are the media person that really helps them understand marketing, I think you walk away with more money in the end. Would you agree or disagree? I think you'll walk away with more money in the end. All right, number 6, if you're going to sell more media, you've got to understand that price will always be an issue. It's going to be the deciding factor when products seem similar. Price becomes an issue when products seem similar. See, one of the things that you don't do well, or a lot of media salespeople don't do very well, is you actually don't do a great job distinguishing yourself from your competition. So what happens is, you're going to find that most advertisers are going to put you in an apples-to-apples scenario with your nearest competitor. How many times have you been compared against a crappy magazine and you're like, they're trash? You want to say that. They're trash. They're terrible. Why would you ever run an ad with them? You know, will they give me half an ad for free or whatever the circumstance is? Very often, advertisers will try to put you in an apples-to-apples comparison, no matter what you're selling, digital, events, whatever the circumstance is. So one of the things that you have to do as a salesperson is you have to create like an apples to salmon comparison. You have to be able to say something like, I understand why you might compare us to so-and-so. I get that. I understand. But what's different about us are these 3 things. Now, I'd love for you to make note of the number 3. Okay, I'd like you to make note of the number 3. What is it about the number 3? So here are the 3 things that distinguish us from our nearest competitor. What's the magic in the number 3? There's magic in the number 3. Everything significant in life, in your life, actually happens in 3s. All right? How many people have been married 3 times? So, okay, no, all right. Let's talk about 3s. 3s, okay? What does it take? What 3 things does it take if I wanted to move 3 times my physical weight? What 3 things would I need? I would need a lever, I would need a fulcrum of some kind, and I would need some type of inertia. A human, man or woman, can move 3 times their physical weight if you have those 3 things, okay? Do we live in a 2D world or do we live in a 3D world? Okay, 3D, I guess you put some glasses on. Maybe it can be 4D, okay? Any religious folks in the room? Father, Son, Holy Ghost. How many legs on a stool, an effective stool? 2? It might work. 3, usually. So what I find is that the brain comprehends 3s very, very easily. All right, 3 kids in my family. Perfect number. We stopped at 2, though. I think we figured that out. 3, okay? So I like to present things in groups of 3 because by nature, people tend to understand things when they're grouped in groups of 3. So as you think about this, what are the 3 things that distinguish you or that make your product uniquely different? And then you want to make note of this. Are the 3 things that you're sharing to create an apples to salmon comparison, are you talking about things that are important to a magazine, or are you talking about 3 things important to that business owner? For example, we've got the best content. Honestly, to the business owner, it might be, okay, who cares? Because I don't know good content from bad content. Some people do. Some people do. So if you're talking about content, maybe that's not the best thing. Well, we always get to press sooner. We always have the latest breaking news. I don't know that that's necessarily important to the advertiser. Maybe it is. So you want to ask yourself, what are the 3 things, when you get drawn into an apples-to-apples comparison, what are the 3 things that distinguish you from your nearest competitor? Because price will always be the deciding factor if your 2 products seem similar. Then, once you come up with those 3 things, ask yourself this. Are those 3 things magazine speak? Are they magazine things? Or are they 3 things important to that advertiser? Something that might be important to your advertiser when you're creating the apples to salmon comparison might be, based on the number of repeat customers in this magazine or website or whatever, based on the number of repeat customers, I am highly confident, based upon others just like you in this magazine, you will be successful. I can't promise you that, but I think it's highly likely depending upon your creative, based on past performance. Number 2, we have more repeat advertisers than any other magazine that serves this sector, B2B or consumer. Those are the type of things that matter to a business owner. Well, we have such circulation, such readership. Not always. That doesn't always matter to the advertiser. It's what does that readership do to me? Better than the number is, we have 38,000 readers. These are the perfect readers for you because they are engineers, or they are farmers, or they are women, or whatever the circumstance is. So if you're going to increase the ad buy, the takeaway on this is you have got to get out of talking about magazine things, and you got to start talking about things that are important to the advertiser. All right, number 7, understand that you want to use videos to drive your sales education mentality or methodology. Using videos to drive your sales education. Now, SAP does a lot of studies, and you can find them at emarketer.com. You can subscribe to Sales and Marketing Management magazine. There's a lot of great articles in there. One of the things they recognized of buyers in general is that in today's landscape, greater than 75% of people buying products expect to get 70-some% of their buying information online. They don't want to talk to you. Let's talk about millennials for a second, very, very briefly. And I'm not a millennial hater, okay? Millennials have made me a better man, okay? I'm not a millennial hater. All the millennials are. Okay, I'm not. Over 90% of millennials in a recent SAP study said they'd rather go to the dentist. They'd rather go to the dentist. That's bad. Than talk to a salesperson. That's really, really bad. So because of that, that's why I love videos. So on this is a B2B website for a magazine called GEMS, J-E-M-S, the Penwell, when I worked at Penwell. And one of the things that I noted that really was successful is that we actually put little short videos about our audience. We put little short videos about our advertiser success. We had a ton of little videos on the website. We also have videos on those websites, or we had at the time, videos about the salesperson. So let's just say that Howard was a salesperson. You might be like, hey, I'm Howard, thrilled to be your sales representative, love to have a chance, because people want to know who it is that they're meeting with. So I use sales videos all the time to share my marketing message because I know that 70-some% of people want to get 70-some% of their information before they actually talk to me. So isn't it interesting that the vast majority of the magazines represented in this room, when I went and looked at your website, one of two things occurs. Number one, you either advertise, download the media kit. There's no lead gen form. There's nothing. So you don't know who's looking at the media kit. Or you let people download the media kit without pricing because you're sneaky. You're like, oh, I'm going to give them the media kit, but they got to call me to get the prices, okay? What that does is that's called pissing people off. That's what it does, okay? Makes people angry, all right? Even in Canada, nice people in Canada, makes them angry as well. So instead, what I do is I try to look at what are the 4, 5, 6, 8 main things that I want to get across to an advertiser. And I want to create some very, very short, less than 2-minute long, little teeny tiny videos. And I want to put them on YouTube. I'm going to add them to my media kit page. And the reason that I want to do that is because I want people, even my competitors, you can't hide from your competition, even my competitors, but I want my advertisers, before they contact me, I want them to be able to find the vast majority of the information that they need. Now, what I typically do on my pricing and on the media kit is I simply have a little very short form that someone fills out. And what it simply says is, to get immediate access to our media kit with full pricing, please tell us that you're a human by providing this information. First name, I don't really even need their last name, but you can. First name, last name, email address, and what company you represent. I don't ask for their phone number because most people are not going to give it anyway. Very simple. When they click submit, they do not get something that says, a sales rep will contact you in 24 hours. They get access to the media kit, but it's generated a sales lead for you. Now, I have clients all the time that challenge me on this. Ryan, no one will fill that form out. Recently, I had a person that challenged me. I said, try it for 30 days. If you don't get enough leads to make it worthwhile, okay, then go back to the way that you were doing it. She reported back to me and said, I think I'm going to need to have somebody help me because I'm getting anywhere from 20 to 30 requests for the media kit every month. I'm going to need somebody to help me fulfill all those. I said, what about all the people in the past that you've missed? So now what I'm coaching this sales professional on is I'm coaching her on taking those leads, putting them into a lead nurturing campaign, adding them to her personal e-newsletter, you know, all these kind of things that successful marketers do. You want your advertisers to be successful marketers, yet typically you, as salespeople and publishers, don't follow those best practices as well. Now, I recently had a client of mine, they would not only get the media kit when they gave their information, they would get 2 other things. An ebook on successful marketing in this particular sector. They got an ebook, as well as they got 50 ideas to make your next ad great. So they got the media kit and 2 other things when they provided that little lead to the client. This is consumer and B2B. So the sales video piece, I think, is important. And you don't need to hire Steven Spielberg to do this, okay? You don't need to do that. They just need to be authentic, short, and you need to have several of them to cover the various angles that you have within your media kit. All right, questions on the video piece before we go on. All right, number 8 of 10. Complex multimedia options require simple presentation tools. All right, the more complex your media options are, the more simple, or the simpler, your presentation tools need to be. Now, a couple of you in the room have seen this before. I'm going to share with you my 3 main tools because I know that 86% of people are visual learners. How many people in this room, raise your hand if you're a visual learner? You learn by seeing things, okay? All right, just out of curiosity, how many people, if you hear it, it's good enough. It's good enough. I don't need to see it. Anybody? Okay, so out of the room, 1, 2 people in the room. So that would tell us that the 86 might even be low. So the more complex your media offering is, the more simple, or the simpler, I guess, your tools need to be. Here are the 3 tools that I most often use. And like I said, a couple of you have seen this before. All right, the first is I have a reader data sheet that talks about my readers, but I have a reader data sheet for each category that I serve. So in the B2B space, you might serve, just as an example, you might have people that sell pumps, you might have software, whatever the categories are, I have a unique data sheet in PDF format for each one of those categories. In the consumer space, I might have one for doctors, dentists, lawyers, or whatever. The reason is because most different categories need different pieces of information. So if I'm going to go to a restaurant owner, I don't want to talk about home ownership. Does that make sense? If I'm going to talk to a software company, I want to make sure that my reader profile sheet isn't talking about manufacturing numbers that aren't applicable. Now, the sheet itself is going to be the same, but on the sheet is going to be specific information for that category. Okay? Another piece of the sheet that's important is some type of visual that explains how big your audience is. Most of the time, your advertisers don't uniquely understand how big your audience is. They just don't get it. So in this particular case, we are read by 35,000 affluent Beverly Hills homeowners each month. That's 3 times more people than you could fit in the Hollywood Bowl Theater. Now, these people live in Hollywood. They've probably been to the Hollywood Bowl Theater. That gives them a visual to understand how big that it is. I do a lot of work in New York City with a lot of companies, and they use Madison Square Garden as a gauge of how big something is. It holds 19,830 spectators. At face value, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. Last month, we had a webinar. I do webinars each month with a company called Magazine Manager, which is the CRM tool that I use. And you can go to 360 Ad Sales, by the way, sign up for those for free. Last month, we had 647 people sign up for the webinar. You were there, sign up for that webinar. In this room, we can basically fit, what, about 50 people? But if you ask an advertiser, how many people can you fit in this room? They'd say 1,000 because they don't understand. So for me, when I go and I think about these things, it's vividly important to understand I've got to show some type of visual. Okay? The next is, what are the offerings that I have? What are the media buffet offerings? If I want to increase the digital sale, I've got to simply show what is it that we're offering. So in this particular case, here's my print, and these are all the different things that we do. Contests, events, social media, e-newsletters, etc. These are all of the things that we have to offer. There's an important point, though, on this. You notice on this sheet there's no pricing? Because the moment you introduce price into the equation, on this type of sheet, is the moment the conversation gets a little sideways, because then they fixate on the price, not on the idea. Make note of that. You don't want the advertiser to fixate on the price, you want them to fixate on the idea at this point. Now keep in mind, in the sales call, we've already talked about present, competitive, and dominant. So we've actually talked about the money up front in the sales call. So you don't have to get your blood pressure doesn't need to rise at the end of the sales call when you're going and talking about money. You've already talked about it. Now maybe they don't have any, but you've already talked about it. All right, the third sheet then is my pricing grid. Now whether you do this visually or you do this and type it out in Word, whichever direction you want to go is fine. What I find is, for my minnow clients, for my smaller clients, this is the approach that I take, because the reason I love this, it's easy for them to understand. For my cod folks, those people right in the middle, or my whales, I usually take this exact same type of thing and I write it out. I write it out in Word format because I just believe that it's more well received from them. Just remember, the more you add digitally to your sale, the more complex it makes it, and then you have to create presentation templates that are a lot more simple if you want them to actually be able to understand. I would say collectively, this template in B2B and the consumer space, that template has probably sold more digital to mid-size and smaller clients than anything else that I've ever done. Now, to larger clients and agencies, are there any agency media buyers in the room before I make a broad statement? Oh, yeah, like they'd raise their hand, right? Other than agencies, which, talk about strangling me to death, okay, other than agencies, dealing with people that are typically going to be mid-sized or larger, I don't always use that, but if I'm selling my events are always looking like that, unless they're a title sponsor, because I don't have time. If you're constantly creating customized proposals for small clients, I think overall it just kills you. All right, so what does this represent? So this is a pricing grid used in Barcelona by Metropolitan Magazine. So the small business package would be, you get an ad in the magazine, and underneath it, you just can't see it. Underneath this, it usually says the size. You'll be in the online directory. We'll do X number of social media posts. Here's the cost. That's the small business plan. The visibility plan, or you could say, you could call this is the dominant plan, competitive plan, or present plan. Doesn't mean that they're not going to do anything. Just remember, some of your advertisers, go back to the very first thing we talked about, some of them don't budget enough to even be present in the marketplace, and that's a little scary if you think about it. So this could be the dominant plan. Look at all the things that people that want to be dominant, that's what they're going to do. For me, it's visuals. It's about presenting things in a very, very simple way. All right, 9 of 10. 9 is be prepared to educate. You've really got to be prepared to educate, especially as it relates to social media. You've got to be prepared. Let's talk about a couple of things real briefly before we come to the end of our time together. If you look at this grid, and this grid comes from marketingprofs.com. If you look at this grid, the cost per click average with social media in 2013 was 92 cents. So that's Facebook ads, Google AdWords, anything you can buy per click. In 2013, it was costing most people on average about 92 cents to get one click over to their website. Look what's happened. In 2016, the average was $2.14. So that's a 100, what is that? Anybody? 120-some% increase in cost. How many people in this room, you've raised your prices 120% in the last 4 years? Anybody? Okay, only Facebook, right? Yep, only Facebook. Now, here's the interesting one, though, on this. If you look at the cost per conversion. Does everybody see the cost per conversion? The cost per conversion, so to take one clicker to a paid customer, was costing about $10.50. Now, in 2016, we're talking $33. So almost a 300% increase. So when someone, and I'm talking with people about social media all the time, when someone says, yeah, I don't want to buy multimedia from you, I just want to run my own social media campaigns. I would stand in front of you today and honestly say, I don't think they accurately understand how much it's actually costing to convert one clicker to a paying customer, unless they're a company that is selling products under that $75 price point. In those circumstances, it may actually work out to their benefit in some of those circumstances. But you can vividly see that the cost per conversion has jumped dramatically. Most advertisers just don't think about that. It's an important piece.
What's the anomaly at 44.50 at 2015? You know why it's...
I don't know. Does everybody notice that? It went from 10 to 30 to 44 to 33. The only thing I can think is that it's just kind of balanced out. I don't actually know. I was not able to find any data on it. All right? So for me, I think you've got to be prepared. Now, if this is something, you look at that and you're like, wow, I need to know more about that. I just did a webinar, and it was called How to Sell Traditional Media to Haters. Okay? Now, that webinar is at 360adsales.com. You can see that for free. And for me, when you go and you look at that, we spend about 15 minutes on that. So each month, the magazine manager folks, and we put together about 60 minutes worth of these, and you can get to access to all that for free. We just don't have a lot of time today.
Sorry, just a question.
Yes?
Isn't this just all largely, I think you mentioned it, just due to the fact that in 2016, everything is much more targeted, so the quality of your reach is threefold, tenfold versus 2013, so you're going to pay more anyway.
The quality of so I'm just going to repeat for the video. The question.
The targeting capabilities on Facebook increased and dramatically changed since 2013, so we're always paying more because we're reaching less but higher quality in our target.
I understand your question. So, the question is, if you couldn't hear it on the video, is that from a targeting perspective, we're targeting better, so the quality of people that we're getting actually should be, and we're paying more, it should be a lot higher. For me, I actually haven't found that to be the case. What I found is that the people that are coming in, because they have so many choices, it's just flat out more expensive. It just flat out is more expensive. And when I look at the amount of cost to reach the same size audience that I can buy in a magazine, the cost to reach that same size audience is cheaper through traditional media than it is through social media. So let me give you an example. I advertise a lot for my business in B2B magazines, B2B specific magazines. For me to put one Facebook post up on Facebook and boost it to reach the audience that magazine reaches, per post can cost me as much as $3,500. So for me, if I look at the audience that a magazine covers locally or B2B, I go in and try to boost a post or target a post to reach that same size audience. The cost online is usually far, far more expensive than if I just use either your media, your social media, rather than doing it myself, or I use your print magazine. Here's another interesting point. If you offer social media, Facebook and Google are going to treat you better because they like media companies. So because of that, I can usually use your targeting mechanisms, and you can actually do it cheaper for me than I can usually do it on my own. And, because you have a good question, a good point, and most business owners shouldn't be managing their own social media. They shouldn't. They just shouldn't, okay, because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. All right, here's the last concept. The last concept is selling these things that you have to offer backwards, okay? And the reason that I entitled my book Selling Backwards is because when I'm building new media products, I start with my advertiser advisory board first. How many people have an advertiser advisory board? Anybody? Okay, now here's what you might want to consider. An advertiser advisory board is typically comprised of 10 to 15 of your best advertisers. Whenever you roll out a new digital product, new pricing structure, anything that you do, what I typically do is I will meet with that advertiser advisory board well in advance. And I'll say, here's what we're thinking of rolling out. Here's what we're thinking of pricing at it. I need your feedback on this. Trust me, advertisers will give you feedback. First piece of feedback, yeah, that's too expensive. So, that's the first thing they're going to say. So I want to walk them through and get them involved, because here's what I found. When it comes to increasing the ad buy, it starts with the advertiser. If it's the advertiser's ideas, the ideas will almost always be better. They will take your ideas to a new place, or they will stop you from selling things that actually they don't want. The vast majority of them don't want. A lot of you are having trouble with some of your digital offerings because advertisers actually don't want them. Well, it's a no-brainer, Howard. It's a no-brainer. Howard, why do you not want this? It's cheap. It's a no-brainer. Well, the timing of it is bad. Or Howard's saying, Ryan, it actually is not something that I want. It's not something that I need as my advertiser. And that's why an advertiser advisory board is so important to the overall equation. Okay? All right, so by a show of applause, how helpful was it? Okay, cool.